Hello everyone. I am unfortunately presenting alone today. I was hoping to be able to present with my collaborators, George Rhodes and Kate Antelak, but timing-wise, that unfortunately didn't work out. So it's just me today, but hopefully I'll be able to do them justice as well in describing their work. So I work at the National Archives in the UK. I saw in the chat that most people seem to be located outside of the UK. I'm going to give a quick description of the National Archives in the UK. So we are the official archive of the UK government, going back many, many centuries. In fact, the oldest document we have is from 1086. It's called the Domesday Book. You might have heard of it. It's quite an iconic document for us. On the screen, I have two examples of our documents. One of them is this image of two books that are open. They look very old, almost like spell books with lots of kind of rows of calligraphy. That is the Domesday Book. This was a survey that William the Conqueror did of England and Wales in 1086 after the Norman invasion. So it's a really, really unique document showing what life was like during that time, almost 1,000 years ago. I've included another example from our collections as well, which is one of the SOSs from the Titanic, because of course the British government did an investigation into the Titanic and why it sank. So you can see on the telegram, it says, "We have struck iceberg, sinking fast, come to our assistance." So that is just a kind of very, very brief example of what can be found in our collection. There's lots more. We have over 16 million documents in our collection. Our building, as you can see on the left, it's kind of a merging between a 70s brutalist building where everything is kept and then this kind of glass-fronted office building. But it's in Kew in London, and it has gigantic repositories and public reading rooms where people can come and look at the archives. Anyone can come for free. And yeah, I have been working there for 4 years. It's a great place to work. So I am in the Education and Outreach Department at the National Archives. So I'm quickly going to describe what we do so that the project I'm going to be describing makes a bit more sense maybe. So we basically use these collections going back 1,000 years to teach history to students and community groups and young people. So some of the ways we do that include the creation of free classroom resources. I have a screenshot here from our website. We basically create classroom resources for teachers to use, following the national curriculum. In the center image here, you can see a group of students in an on-site workshop at the National Archives. So we do workshops every week where schools come to the National Archives. We do multiples a day, and we do different workshops, again, following the national curriculum. And then on the right here is from our outreach team. They do community events, trying to reach especially like underrepresented parts of our audience. So yeah, we do lots of different things that I haven't even mentioned here, but that's basically what we do. Okay, so sensing the archives. This basically came out of a research project I did in 2023. I did this as part of the RLUK, which is Research Libraries UK, and National Archives Professional Research Fellowship Scheme. It's kind of a joint scheme that they do. And you submit a research project and you get a small budget and a year to do it. So the thing I was interested in finding out about, I'm a sighted person, and I was doing a lot of work with web accessibility because I'm in the online education team. So I do a lot of the online resources. I felt like I wasn't fully understanding why I was doing a lot of the accessibility like checklists that I was doing, because we didn't really have blind audiences coming on site. We didn't really engage with them directly. And I wanted to learn more about, what can we actually do to reach this audience more directly? What can make things not just accessible for this audience, but also fun and engaging? This is obviously something we strive to do with our sighted students, is to make history kind of come alive for them. I wanted to look at how do we better understand these audiences' needs, and also what kind of technology is available to us. There's so much technology out there for accessibility. We all have, in organizations, we all have limited budgets and time. And I wanted to really figure out what can we afford, what do we need, what will really suit what we kind of do at the archives. And then also, what kind of opportunities can this increased level of understanding give us? And also, can it open us up to new audiences? So Sensing the Archives came out of this. It kind of started as a pilot workshop in March 2024. Basically, it is a workshop that uses a mixture of sensory and audio props, original documents, and 3D printed tactile images to do a learning workshop for blind and partially sighted students, school-age students, um, designed from the ground up for these students, rather than having kind of accessibility added on to something later. It was designed from the start for this audience group. Okay, so very quickly, why this project? But I'm sure everyone knows why. But basically, we, have the inclusive archive as one of our strategy aims. Everyone has a right to access what we hold. Everyone has the right to experience us through what we do. It's our job to facilitate that. Obviously, everyone has these different access needs. We have legal responsibilities as well. The UK Civil Service, which we are part of, has really stringent accessibility guidelines. These are obviously not the main reason why we want to make things accessible, but they help remind us, what we need to keep working towards. And then in terms of audience needs, so obviously there are quite a lot of people living with sight loss in the UK, over 2 million, but we are focusing on young people here. So there are about over 40,000 people with a vision impairment who are young people in the UK. And so this is kind of like a lower incidence but very high impact disability for these young people, because there are statistics that come out of the Royal National Institute of the Blind, who we have worked with as well, that show that, education, attainment, well-being, and stuff is much lower for this audience group compared to their able-bodied peers. So this obviously makes it much more important for us to really make sure that what we offer can reach this group as well. Okay, so before I go into the pilot workshop and then kind of how the project ended up, being, I wanted to quickly talk a little bit about how I kind of came to, what I ended up doing, what we ended up doing. Because the way I did the research during this fellowship scheme, I usually do research by reading lots of things. I work in history, so lots of research into the archives. But because this is research about lived experiences, I really felt like I needed to focus on talking to people who knew more than me and collaborate with people who know more than me. I still don't know that much, and I'm still really eager to talk to people and collaborate with people. So that's why I'm really excited to be presenting here today. So here is this is a shortened list of everyone I talked to. I think my slides have been shared, so I'm not going to read everything on the slide, but my mentors were from the University of Surrey and the University of Southampton. I talked to people who worked at the University of Southampton, lots of great people there because of that, and also Southampton Sight, a great charity there. I also talked to the Disabled People's Archive in Manchester, which I really recommend checking out. A few people like Janie Hall, who works with kind of school services for this group. Textbox is an old text kind of service in the UK. The Wellcome Collection, a great museum in the UK that deals with kind of disability and things like that. Thomas Pocklington Trust and the RNIB are big kind of charities in the UK that deal with blind and partially sighted people. So yeah, talking to lots and lots of people through these connections, I eventually met my collaborators, George Rhodes and Kate Antelak, who I will discuss in a little bit, I believe. Yes, I will discuss them now, actually. So the pilot workshop is kind of what kicked off the project as it exists now. So this was basically our attempt at designing and trialing a educational workshop for a group of blind and partially sighted students. So we ended up working with New College Worcester for this. This is a specialist school for visually impaired students. They do secondary only, I believe. The head of history is Jeanette Normanton-Airy. So I reached out to her. She was absolutely amazing in helping to organize this kind of pilot trial workshop, bringing a group of, I think it ended up being 11 students on the day from year 8 and 9. 70% of the students were Braille users, so this was our first time using Braille in our workshops. The basis of the workshop, as you can probably tell from the image I've included here, the image shows a student exploring a kind of 3D printed tactile version of one of our documents. So the workshop was based on this idea of being able to use tactile versions of our documents. The problem with an archive is that if you're not familiar with archives, they have some exciting objects, but a lot of them are filled with two-dimensional paper and text-based material. So this is difficult in the best of times to make engaging a lot of the time. It's difficult when you have two-dimensional objects because you can't feel what's on them unless you do something like this, where you are creating kind of raised surfaces of the image to allow for them to be able to be felt. Because a lot of museums will do, touch tours where you can feel the shape of a sculpture or artwork, but that doesn't work as well for us. So that's why I got interested in tactile images. Tactile images obviously have a really, really long history. I haven't got an image of it. I should have included an image of it. We actually have tactile maps in our collection from 1830s, I believe. So we know that they have a very, very long history. But the benefit of the ones that we are using, so these are created by George Rhodes, who works as digital accessibility lead at the University of Westminster. But this was a part of his PhD project. So this pilot workshop was a case study for his PhD. He is working on kind of 3D printing tactile images, and I think there are some slides that explain more in depth later. But yeah, so this is kind of was formed the basis of the workshop. Okay, so I am now going to go through how we have put together the workshop, what it contains, basically. So it starts with a repository tour. A repository is basically a giant storeroom for archives. So on the screen here, I have one of our repositories. It contains, shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves of document boxes, which contain our archives. Again, 16 million of them. So the reason why we wanted to include a repository tour, this is not something that is generally available to the public. It's also not something that we usually bring students along for. Students usually just come for a workshop. The reason we wanted to do this is because it makes things easier for these schools. It justifies the effort it takes to organize a trip if you are away for a whole day, rather than just for like an afternoon workshop. So adding like the repository tour, lunch, and then workshop really makes it more easy for a school to organize this kind of thing. The other reason is when sighted students enter our building, they can really see how large it is just by looking at it. And that's often how we describe, what we do. Look at our building. Why is it so big? Why does it have such narrow windows? It's to keep the document safe. So this was a way for the students to experience the scale of our building, to get a better grip on what we do, to be introduced to handling materials. So they were introduced to the different weights that we use for the documents. And they were also introduced to some of our more three-dimensional objects as well, which was fun. So yeah, it was really, really valuable to have that, to really help them get a sense of, this is what the National Archives is, this is what an archive is. That really helped contextualize for the rest of the day. So after a lunch break, we went into the workshop itself. So the story of the National Archives revolves around a rat. Basically, a rat ate some documents. This was in the 1800s. And it was used as evidence for why we need a national archives. And we still have the rat corpse in our collection. Instead of showing the rat corpse, we told this story through touch by having the students open a chest containing a fluffy rat toy, of course, warning them beforehand what what it was. That was not real, not a real rat. Kind of like an icebreaker to introduce them to the National Archives. Then we did some more contextualizing for, what is an archive? How do we know about history through archives? By introducing them to a document box filled with different archival materials. Um, they had, for example, leather, photograph, wax seal, cotton rag paper, parchment, things like that. So they got to feel around with the materials, and then they connected the correct material to a description on the worksheets that they had. And just as a side note, we really wanted to encourage the students to work as independently as possible. So we made sure that, every worksheet was in either Braille or large print. We worked with the teacher beforehand to kind of get a seating plan going so that we knew which students would need Braille, which students would need large print, which students would need color contrasts, etc. Then, so the way we do our workshops includes like a mystery document approach where it's very based on sight. So we will take a document and we will say, look at this document, what can you see? And that's usually how we introduce students to a document for the first time. So we couldn't do that for this workshop, obviously. So instead we tried to kind of create this mystery document approach using the tactile images. So the students were divided into 4 groups. Each group was given a document to become, experts on over the course of the workshop. And they got their tactile images with minimal context, and they were invited to explore the image and see what they could find. This was also a great opportunity for us to test our tactile images with the students and get their feedback and see what kind of worked and what didn't work. Because if you've ever made tactile images, it is much more an art than a science. So yeah, these are basically images of the students kind of touching and exploring the tactile images. So then we had this concept called a hint bag. These were basically bags where we included sensory and audio props that related to the context of the document. And the students got to kind of explore these bags, and then that built up further clues in their head about what this document was about. So if I give some examples, one of the documents was a medieval map of land ownership. It was an argument over, who owned which land. And so the students with that document, they got, for example, some artificial grass to touch. They got a smell pot containing burnt peat because it was peat lands, and I had to stand outside the National Archives in the morning and burn the peat with a lighter. They got a audio button. When you pressed it, were the voices of 2 of my colleagues who were kind of arguing, "It's my land. No, it's my land." To again give the idea that this is a land ownership dispute. There were some documents. There was one document that was a Tudor battle scene, Mary Queen of Scots and her armies facing the lords opposing her. So the students with this bag got a little cannon. They got the audio of, horses and hooves. They got audio of people, an army fighting. They got a crown to show that royalty was involved in this battle. So things like that, which was also a very kind of fun way for the students to explore the documents and the history behind them. So after these hint bags, the students got their tactile images back. They got worksheets with kind of the full context of the document, and they got to explore one final time and then prepare a presentation for the rest of the class on their document. And then the grand finale was the touching of the original documents. This was basically the students getting to touch the actual documents that they had been studying. And then also two special documents from our safe room, Henry VIII's will and a letter from Elizabeth I. So on the left here, you can see a group of students kind of exploring one of our tutor books. And on the right, a student is kind of being directed to touch the signature of Elizabeth I. So what really enabled us to do this, which was really important because the original documents are so key, was our collection care team, wonderful team, really exploring this idea of risk versus benefit when it comes to preserving documents. So they examined each document that we had in the workshop and made sure that we knew how much the document could be touched, where it could be touched, and which parts were safe for the students to touch, because some documents contain dangerous pigments. So for each document, we had a staff member there who helped direct the students if there were any places they couldn't touch, and made sure that the students were kind of touching the documents in a respectful and careful way, which they all did, and it went very smoothly. So just a little bit about designing this workshop. So I've spoken already about our collaboration with George Rhodes, who created the tactile models, and Jeanette from New College Worcester. So this was George's first time creating models for a school audience. So Jeanette's experience with her decades of teaching partially sighted and blind students really helped him design the models, because she has used tactile images a lot in her teaching. So that was kind of a long kind of back and forth collaboration kind of there as well. We designed, as I already kind of alluded to, a new kind of lesson plan that was inspired by our existing lesson plans, but again, really put these students front and center rather than having them be kind of afterthoughts or add-ons to our existing material. So one of our teachers, Hannah Carter, was the person who delivered and designed the lesson plan. I mentioned Kate Antelek earlier. So she was a really, really key part of the project team and still is. She is a external teacher and consultant. So her work, she's a history teacher. She's also a blind Braille user herself. So she is kind of and she's also taught blind and visually impaired students. So she kind of came with a lot of experience, teaching experience, and lived experience. So she was really key to, helping us design the lesson plan, reviewing our plan, reviewing everything, helping, decide what documents we should choose. She is still very, very involved in the kind of continuing development of this project. So yeah, we could not do this without her. She, for example, is the one who really inspired us to focus so much on original documents, as I mentioned. When she has come to the National Archives to explore our documents there, she really emphasizes, the importance for this audience group of touching the original documents, which is important for all of us. It's very powerful, but it's especially powerful for these students. So that's why we put such an emphasis on original documents. We are, thinking about how can we bring this workshop outside of the National Archives, but we need to make sure that the original document element is still there. I mentioned already about the inclusion of a repository tour. The other important thing is to make sure that things were organized and relaxed. There is a high incidence rate amongst this audience group of neurodiversity. So about half the students had some form of autism spectrum disorder. We are kind of used to this in our team because we have an existing SEND program. So we were able to accommodate that with, quiet spaces, space for the students to take a break, to step away if they needed, sensory objects that could be kind of fiddled with, etc. So yeah, with the collaboration between us and the school beforehand, everything went very smoothly there. Okay, so this is normally I would love for George to talk about this because he obviously knows this much better than I do. So I will read his slides, and if you have any technical questions about it, I will happily share George's contact information and direct the questions to him because I unfortunately cannot answer too many of the technical questions. I can answer some surface level ones, but so I'm going to read from his slide. So he uses the optocartography method. Optocartography is a new methodology for converting two-dimensional visual maps and digital images into high-fidelity tactile diagrams without the need for 3D modeling knowledge using free software and limited hardware investment. So you can see an example of, him converting a floor plan into this 3D model. So this is an early example that he did for us. This is the Holler's Great Fire of London map from 1666. It shows the damage from the Great Fire of London. So this kind of blank space in the center, that's where the fire has destroyed all of the buildings. And you can see how it's still quite densely populated outside of the fire destruction zone. So this is what it looks like as a tactile image. So basically, George needs to work closely with us to simplify the original document because the thing you need to do with tactile images is, of course, to simplify them to make them readable and understandable. To do this, we need to be able to communicate to George what we want the students to pick up from the document and to learn from the document. So in this case, we obviously want to focus on the fact that the fire destroyed such a large part of central London. That is kind of the key point of this document. We also want to make sure that the Tower of London is included. That's a really important kind of reference point for anyone looking at the map, really, to kind of figure out where this destruction took place. And then, of course, George has included some Braille descriptions in the top as well. So these are the documents that George created for the workshop. So we have a map of the St. Peter's Field protest or massacre, Peterloo Massacre in 1819. So you can see that the crowd, which are kind of represented by lots and lots of small dots on the original map, have become tactile dots. The red line of the soldiers moving through the crowd has become spiky dots. So they can be, the difference there can be felt. This is an engraving of the same event. We really struggled with, images that are viewed from the side like this. And the end result was really, really great, but the students definitely gave us feedback on, how to simplify something like this even further because it still needs guidance from the teachers in order to really figure out what is going on this image. Whereas top-down maps are much easier to make tactile. Like this one, this is a medieval map from 1450. This is the map of land ownership that I mentioned. You can see there's kind of these fields surrounded by little villages, rivers going all around, and these very cute little bridges going over the rivers. I love this map. This is probably my favorite of the tactile images that we have. And you can also see on the sides there, we have north, south, east, and west, because this map was designed to be read from different angles so that people could sit around it on a table and discuss this dispute. This is the Tudor battle scene with Mary Queen of Scots that I mentioned. This one was also really a struggle. So we had obviously the two armies side by side. We have the soldiers holding all these kind of stakes and guns. Those elements were really readable. The fact that there were two armies, the fact that they were holding weaponry. Then some of the details were a bit harder to read, like the houses surrounding the scene, the horses, the fact that Mary Queen of Scots is on a horse in the center of the image. It's hard to read, even if you can see the image, to be honest. So this is probably something we want to further develop, again, based on the feedback that we received. And this is a wage slip from John Blank. He was a Black trumpeter in Henry VIII's court. So we originally thought that text-based documents would not work for tactile images. but the school requested this one especially. And the calligraphy is what is really being communicated here. And it actually turned out really well. And the teachers were able to kind of explain what calligraphy is to the students, which is obviously extremely hard to describe if you're going to visually describe it. Okay, so I have some time left, and I will just discuss some of the feedback we got from the students and the teachers. So we collected feedback forms from the students on the day, and then we had in-depth interviews with the teachers a few weeks later. And that the feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and that has really encouraged us to continue pursuing this project and kind of develop it further. So I'm going to read some highlights. I couldn't help but put lots of examples on the screen, but I'm not going to read all of them. But I think my slides should be able to be shared if you want to like read them yourself. But I will read some examples. So from the students, awesome, interesting, really useful. Learning how archives work is important. That's obviously exactly what we want to hear. From the teachers, I've been on numerous trips, and I would say this is right up at the top of all the trips I've been on. So that's just kind of me being like, yes, this was successful, which is, what we want from the feedback. For the tour, we also got some feedback. One of the students said, amazing, I loved it, better than the workshop. A tour like through a maze, which I love that description of the repositories. And then from the teachers, I think having done the tour gave context for them, actually looking at the materials, because otherwise it could have been a handling session brought to the school. But the fact that we've been around and seen where they were all kept, and they'd seen how big all the scale of the archives was, I think it worked well together. The touching original documents from the students, the most fun part was the clues and the original drawing. A lot of the students said that the most fun part was, the original documents at the end, which, is always the most fun part. Much better than a history trip. We were asked to question ourselves. And the teachers were also very, very excited to see the documents from Henry VIII and Elizabeth I at the end. Just a brief one about organization. So one of the teachers said, being given the sort of basic outline of the day beforehand, I was able to sit a couple of them down and say, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and it removed all the anxiety. So those little things are also so important. So, it's not just about the flashy stuff of the workshop, it's also about the kind of preparations beforehand, and how much that can impact how well the actual day goes, and how well, whatever access needs there are met as well. I love this quote from one of the teachers. Make sure that when other people come down, please get them out for other students to use, not just if they got someone with a vision impairment, because there's so many other students who would get so much from it. Don't want them shoved away in a cupboard and just brought out once a year kind of thing, which I think is such an important piece of feedback. And I've really tried to take that on heart, on board. The tactile models, I do try and bring them out as often as possible. Sighted people who see these documents absolutely love them as well. I think they kind of bring out this urge in people to just explore through touch, and it gives you a whole other way into the document. The teacher who held the workshop also said that it was easier to teach the documents in a way with these models, because the students automatically went into a lot of detail, whereas sighted students might just look at the kind of entirety of the document and not look at any of the details. So it can be useful for so many people. Some feedback for the tactile images, the tactile mapping being better than the pictures. So this is from a student who had low vision, but was also given an enlarged image of the document. So indicating of buildings and rivers were better on the tactile than on the picture, which I thought was interesting and quite nice as well. And then, of course, I mentioned from the teachers that the calligraphy model, we can never really explain calligraphy, could we? So just that was such a unexpectedly successful model, in my opinion. Okay, so I obviously am happy to answer questions. Please do ask questions. I also would love to hear from your experience, any challenges or experiences that you've had with any topics that I've talked about today. Like I said in the beginning, I'm trying to do research still, and I do most of my research in this particular area by talking to other people and hearing from their experiences. So, yes, please do kind of tell me now or later any kind of, things that are like a comment rather than a question. Um, okay, and I think that's me. Sorry for being so out of breath during this presentation. I'm just recovering from a cold and my lungs are not working as well as usual. So hopefully that wasn't too distracting. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Ellen. It was a great presentation and very exciting to see just the difference in the accessibility in national archives in various countries, being somebody born and raised in the US. So I'm interested in what you've learned. I mean, you talked about creating this program sort of with the intended audience in mind rather than trying to adjust a different program. And so I'm wondering if, as you do this over and over again or annually, what you have learned to make it better, either for these students or for a wider variety of students with disabilities.
Yeah, I think there's so many ways to answer that question because we're learning so much all the time. Like I mentioned, we are kind of currently working on developing this further and bringing it to more schools and students. So I'm sure we're going to learn so much more as well. But this was my first experience with tactile images, and have learned so much about how to create tactile images. Not just the technical side of it with the 3D printing method that George has. I still don't know that much about that, to be honest. But the way of translating images into tactile models is so tricky, much trickier than I might have thought before I started this. And it's something that we still need to like develop our expertise in. Some are more easy than others. It also really helps to have Kate, for example, involved because she can review the models and things like that based on her experience as well. But yeah, just the idea that it really is so much more of an art than a science, and it can take multiple kind of tries to get it right as well. I think a lot of people think it's like a one-to-one reproduction, which it obviously is not, and that has been a huge learning. I've learned just a lot about working with young people who are blind and partially sighted. Like I mentioned, we don't have a lot of those students coming in, and that's because we didn't have anything for them. We had some mainstream schools that had like visually impaired students with low vision in the class, like one student in the class. So they would get some accessible alternatives, but we didn't really have, large groups of blind and partially sighted kids coming in. So that's not only been something that I've learned about, but also my colleagues who are teachers. So they have kind of been able to receive some training, especially with the help of Kate, in how to teach these students. And I think a lot of them are a bit nervous in the beginning because they are worried that they're going to get something wrong. But I think it's been a lot more like positive and fun rather than nerve wracking, which is really great to see.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So we also did get a question in the chat, just because a lot of animal lovers. What is the cat name?
Oh, my cat.
Yes.
Her name is Anouk, Anouk.
Fantastic.
I appreciate the cat questions. And I also saw someone saying that they were jealous of my bookshelf ladder. Thank you.
Yes, we've actually had quite a few historians and librarians this year, and so I think that your background proves envious to many. There's another question as to whether or not you plan on expanding this project for the broader audience. You said the archives are open to the public,
Yeah.
expanding it to adults with visual impairments that may just want to understand and participate in the archives in general.
Yeah, I really want to do that. Obviously, my team mostly deals with school age students, but we do have a team called the outreach team within our department, and they deal with a lot of different age groups, including older people and things like that. So I work very closely with them. They're super interested in making use of the research and the work that I've done to reach those older groups as well. I've also done a lot of kind of advocacy within the larger organization to spread things like electronic magnifiers, and just we have a braille printer now, which we didn't before, and kind of making sure that we can produce braille documents for our exhibitions, making sure that everyone in the organization knows about the tactile models we do have. So I've kind of held document displays and stuff for the staff so that when lo- general audience members who want to use the tactile models, hopefully they can like find out about them easier and kind of use them. But yes, so that is like ongoing work in progress, but I definitely want to like reach more audiences than just the school audience, even though that is like the primary focus right now.